first rule of Fight Club is we do not talk about Fight Club. Wow, okay. Easiest review ever. Rewind United is an in-depth analysis of movies chosen by our viewers. If you haven't seen this movie, I strongly urge you to watch it before seeing this review. Fight Club is a movie I've been hearing people quoting and talking about for years, but somehow never got around to seeing. You may find it hard to believe that my first viewing of this film was for this review, but perhaps even harder to believe is the fact that I somehow went 13 years hearing about this movie but managing never to have the ending ruined. I don't know if that's just because I'm extremely lucky and nobody ever spoiled it, or if it's because I have a habit of not paying attention to things I don't care about or don't want to know at the time. The last time I really listened to someone about a movie I thought there was a snowball's chance I might actually sit down and watch sometime was Monty Python and the Holy Grail, a film I'm sure I would have thought was funny had all the jokes not been ruined for me by virtually everyone I went to high school with. I am Captain Logan's complete lack of interest. So when this was the highest movie voted for Rewind United and I sat down to watch it, I was really grateful that all I really knew was that Brad Pitt and Edward Norton were in it, that it was apparently the consummate guy movie, and the quote, first rule of Fight Club is that we do not talk about Fight Club. I didn't know that had any greater meaning beyond there's this club where guys beat each other up and they don't want anyone else to know about it. That didn't sound especially appealing to me. That's probably why I never watched it. I certainly had no idea how thoughtful the film was, or that it was an exploration of madness brought on by the expectations of modern American consumerist culture. I didn't know that it was a black comedy, nor as the film began and I was immediately disturbed by the protagonist's visits to support groups for men who were dying, that I expect to ever find myself laughing at anything, which I sometimes did. To say there's a lot going on in this movie would be an understatement, and I can't possibly cover everything. It's not a character study so much as an exploration of male identity in our modern world. It asks a lot of questions about the roles men are expected to play and the goals they're expected to have. Beyond that, and the clear realization at the end that Edward Norton's character and Tyler Durden are the same person, practically everything the movie is doing is open to interpretation. The movie is all about finding one's identity, and it plays with that by showing us these events through only the protagonist's perspective. Almost never are we away from Edward Norton's character, and when we are, when he goes to see Marla during her attempted suicide, we're with Tyler, whom we know later on is completely taking over the protagonist's mind and burying him deep inside. Our protagonist is so screwed up, he has no idea that Tyler is his imaginary friend, and since we only see things from his/their perspective, we see an extremely skewed version of this world. He's an unreliable narrator, and that allows us the freedom to interpret what he sees and experiences in a lot of different ways. Most films show you what a director wants you to see, and in that sense, it's through a particular lens. Films usually present their stories in the way they want you to experience them to make the points they want to make. In most superhero films, for instance, the film tells us who the bad guy is and who the good guy is, rather than leaving it up for us to decide. But not really Fight Club. I know I'm supposed to be uncomfortable, which I am, and I know I'm supposed to understand how the protagonist and Tyler feel about the world, which I do. But what I personally take away from it is left up to me. It's quite poetic in that way. Tyler preaches freedom throughout the movie. Freedom from being what other people tell you to be, freedom to be who you naturally are, and not how corporate America wants you to be, so you'll, I'll paraphrase, buy things you don't need. And whether you buy into any of his wisdom, regardless of the extreme ways he tries to change the world, the movie echoes that sentiment by giving its audience some credit and not wrapping everything up nicely in the end. I am Captain Logan's intense frustration with spoon-fed entertainment. I think the movie really succeeded in that, considering how polarized critics were on the film. Everybody had a different take on it. Some found it very preachy, an outright attack on consumer culture. Some, like Roger Ebert, thought it was a masculine thrill ride, a lot of unnecessarily violent fight scenes with a framework that masquerades as high art to provide an excuse to show a lot of guys hitting each other. Those who love it seem to either see it as a masterpiece of satire that explores nihilism nihilism and anarchy, or, as Matt Noller of Slant Magazine says in his Blu-ray review from 2009, a celebration of hypermasculinity. Now, Matt Noller also says that's misreading the movie. After all, can we really say it's celebrating masculinity when the members of the Fight Club are equally as lemming or drone-like under Tyler's leadership as they are as working members of the society Tyler says has stolen their masculinity? There are a lot of things I certainly don't think the movie is. It's not violence for the sake of violence, as there are consequences to the violence, and the characters in the film, as Helena Bonham Carter suggests in the commentary, don't fight to inflict pain so much as they fight to feel pain, to feel alive, feelings their mundane lives with the jobs they hate don't afford them. And I also don't think it's just taking pot shots at the culture. There's definitely a lot of criticism there, especially in how easy it is for Tyler to recruit men into his club. The idea seems to be that society has created mindless, unthinking puppets who will follow anyone who sounds good. They think they're becoming enlightened, but we see that they're really just trading one form of slavery for another. After all, Tyler starts out talking about freedom and taking control of your life, and then he creates soldiers who do whatever he tells them to, calls them maggots, and says they're not special. But all good antagonists have a vein of truth in their crazy talk, and Tyler's speeches about being who you want to be often make a lot of sense. He says, "You are not your job, you are not the contents of your wallet." He holds a young man at gunpoint and forces him to promise he'll get on the right college path to become a veterinarian, which is what he really wants to do, instead of working a pointless job at a gas station he doesn't like. This kid only went to junior college before because he thought he was supposed to. When Tyler first asks him what he studied, he just says, "stuff." I gotta say, this scene kind of hit a nerve with me. I'm always really bothered by people who spend a lot of money on college only to never pick a career or drop out and feel guilty about it. I've known a lot of people like that. After Tyler gets him to say what his real dream is and he leaves, Tyler tells the protagonist he'll wake up tomorrow morning and his breakfast will taste better than anything you and I have ever tasted. Now my question is this a criticism of society for creating this kid, or is it a criticism of the kid for not using his own brain and allowing himself to get swept up in the arbitrary rules of culture, like you must go to school to be successful, whether you ever choose a major or have any actual goals or anything? You can certainly say that the protagonist has a part of himself that feels like society is just sucking the life out of people and using them as a means to an end. That's Tyler. But again, just because the movie is from his perspective doesn't mean we have to make that same judgment call. We may live in a society where it's easy to let mass consumerism tell you what to do, but perhaps we're ultimately the idiots if we don't find a way to make that society work for our own lifestyle and how we choose to live. Keep in mind that Tyler and Edward Norton's characters are two opposite extremes at the beginning, which makes sense because Tyler is the embodiment of everything the protagonist wishes he can be. When the protagonist finally realizes they're the same guy, Tyler says, "I look how you want to look, I talk like you want to talk," etc. He's presented as a psychotic, so we have to take everything the movie does with a grain of salt. It's all on the most extreme scale possible. That's the best way to explore ideas like this. One of these guys starts out as the most superficial and stereotypically materialistic men I've ever seen, and the other thinks the only way to be happy is to get rid of everything culture says you need, hit rock bottom, and start over from scratch. He says that self-improvement is masturbation. There has to be something in the middle, because being each of those extremes is what's turned the protagonist into a crazy person. I am Captain Logan's tendency to overanalyze. I don't think I've ever had a more profoundly different second viewing of a film than I did with Fight Club, and I also think it's a movie that, more than a lot of others, absolutely requires a second viewing. The conceit that holds the entire film together is there from the very beginning, but isn't revealed to the audience until the final act of the movie, only about 25 minutes from its ending. That made my first viewing extremely disorienting. When the protagonist first realizes he and Tyler are the same person, I realized there was some lead up to it and that it didn't come out of nowhere, but only on a second viewing did I see just how right in front of my face it all was. It's a grand experiment in misdirection. David Fincher tries to see just how much of the truth he can dangle right in front of us and then distract us with uncomfortable images and concepts, so we won't know what's really going on until the precise moment he wants us to. If you figured it out before that moment on first viewing, good for you. I spent the movie thinking certain things weren't adding up, but knowing in the back of my mind it was trying to confuse me on purpose. I am Captain Logan's preconceived notions of modern film progression. Listening to the director and cast commentary and doing a bit of reading, I discovered I'm not alone. A lot of first-time viewers had many of the same reactions I did, asking questions like why the members of Project Mayhem Mayhem continue to treat the protagonist like he's their leader when he thinks Tyler is keeping him entirely in the dark, and thinking Marla is a pathetic waste, sleeping with Tyler just because she's desperate, but never talking to him about anything. I appreciated and understood much more the second time around. Now I really feel sorry for Marla, being jerked around by the protagonist who's really two different people, but she doesn't know that, and she's with him because they're so similar. The scenes where she and Edward Norton's character talk in the kitchen are masterfully written. She gets angry with him for telling her to leave just after a night of intense sex, when he has no idea he was even in bed with her, and he never understands why he's angering her because the truth never comes out. Tyler's told him not to talk with her about him, for the same reason that the first rule of Fight Club is not to talk about it, and the first rule of Project Mayhem is not to ask questions. I found the movie much more satisfying and also interesting once I knew what the conceit was. I don't know if that's a criticism of the film or not. I don't know what you do with it. Fincher hides the secret too expertly to say that he should have given it away earlier, and of course, that would be impossible for it to even kind of be the same movie. Again, it's about seeing the world from the eyes of this protagonist, so we can't know anything before he does. Plus, there's a very poetic device used at the end, the pornographic frame that subliminally pops up for a split second that encapsulates the conceit. I want to talk about this for a minute. When the protagonist talks about one of Tyler's many jobs, being a projectionist, he says that Tyler puts frames of pornography into family films to play with their assumptions and preconceived notions. They're made really uncomfortable, but they don't know why, because the frame wasn't there long enough for them to have consciously noticed it. He says they don't know they saw it, but they saw it. At the very end, just after the credit card company buildings have been destroyed and Edward Norton's character has ridded himself of Tyler, we see that pornographic frame before the credits roll, and that's the one piece of the entire movie that isn't directly from his perspective. Keep in mind, we see everything he sees. His quick hallucinations from insomnia, his trips into his cave where he sees his spirit animal, even the moments where he glimpses Tyler before he even meets Tyler. We're taken into his mind during the opening credits, literally, and we stay there the whole movie up until he shoots himself in the head, allowing himself to start his life anew. My take on this, and this is maybe kind of weird, is that once he's done this, we're looking at him from a new perspective. We're no longer in his head. The movie at this point knows it's a movie and breaks the fourth wall, subliminally, only for a fraction of a second, to encapsulate the experience we've all just had with one brief image. Its awareness of itself as a movie in the last second makes a strange kind of sense, by the way, because as a major motion picture, it's part of the very culture Tyler is rebelling against. The movie itself says, forget what you know, just like Tyler does. I don't think it can make Tyler's arguments, whether we like what he has to say or not, compelling without doing that. Anyway, so neither the protagonist nor the audience, unless they somehow picked up on it early, knows Tyler and he are the same person, but it's clearly there in front of us the whole time. Like the pornographic frame, we don't know we've seen it, but we definitely have. And also like the pornographic frame, it makes us and the protagonist nervous. We know we're missing something. We know things aren't adding up, and we're irritated because it feels like someone's deliberately doing this to us, but we can't put our finger on just what it is. And when we finally see it, it's even more disturbing than not knowing what it was. I am Captain Logan's wholesome sensibilities. And that's what Tyler is talking about the whole movie. People are lulled by society into a false sense of security. They believe they need expensive furniture and clothes and whatever else is being sold to them because they're programmed that way. And the subconscious understanding that the lives they're leading are without purpose and unsatisfying and unnatural gnaws at them. But the truth is uncomfortable, so they never really see it. And they allow themselves to continue to live in this constructed reality, believing they need what they don't need and allowing society to define them by their jobs and their status. Again, I think the film leaves it up to you to decide if you agree with any of Tyler's conclusions, but it goes out of its way to make us understand where he's coming from and all the way up until that last disturbing image. By the end of my second viewing, I couldn't believe I didn't catch the conceit before the protagonist does. I could list dozens of very clear clues, my favorite being when he beats himself up in front of his boss to make it look like his boss did it, and he says that for some reason it reminds him of the first time he and Tyler fought. Watching it again, you realize he means that when he and Tyler were fighting, it was really just him hitting himself. Another is when Tyler makes Edward Norton's character crash his car, telling him he needs to learn to let go. The Project Mayhem members in the back seat are clearly really confused about why he's having this intense conversation with himself. And then he says, "You need to forget what you know, especially about you and me." How did I not pick up on all this? I am Captain Logan's lacking observation. I know I'm really stuck on this, but what I find most difficult in trying to draw conclusions by the end is that I can never be certain about what I'm looking at. We're in the mind of a psychotic with two extreme personalities. From that uncertain perch, we're looking at a world that appears to be a heightened reality that isn't exactly like the world we live in. Everything looks bleaker and sadder than our world, at least to me. Everything seems exaggerated, and a lot of very unbelievable things happen. Tyler is able to recruit a lot of men in several cities in a pretty short amount of time, so many that by the end, the protagonist can't seem to meet a guy without him calling him sir. At the police headquarters toward the end, 3 of the 4 cops in the room with him are members of Project Mayhem. I can see why Tyler's message would be enticing, but it seems far-fetched that he'd recruit that many people. And equally far-fetched is that Edward Norton's character manages to shoot himself in the head at the end at precisely the angle he needs to survive, and he's able to stand up, talk, and walk around. The question is, are we in a world where the rules work differently and we're supposed to suspend our disbelief, or, because we're getting it from inside the head of a nutcase, do things unfold in the movie perhaps a little differently than we would have seen them if we'd been in, say, Marla's head? I'm not saying that nothing in the movie really happens, that the entire film is inside his mind or anything, although there is that rumor that he was born in a mental institution, so if you wanted to really stretch, I suppose you could make the argument that he never left it. I mean, I wouldn't, but I guess you could. I'm only saying that he's about the most unreliable narrator I've ever seen. And literally, even in this movie, he's narrating. We're seeing what he sees, and he's also talking directly to us. And there's no way for us to know if everything he's telling us is true. So I feel I can only really analyze the movie from the way he's perceiving things. What I know is that his perfect vision of himself has himself so disenfranchised with the status quo because of how it preys on people and makes their lives worthless that he wants to destroy the status quo, as Tyler tries to do by blowing up credit card buildings, and put everyone on a natural, even playing field. In his perfect persona, men are really men by rejecting society and giving in to some of their baser instincts, like fighting, and are emasculated by giving into the culture, clearly symbolized by the threat of literal emasculation anytime a man goes against Project Mayhem. And while the Tyler part of him feels this way, his other self likes his lifestyle too much to completely give in to Tyler's terrorist plot. He knows that neither personality will do. So what's really interesting is how differently we can interpret what happens at the end. On the one hand, you could say that in order to find true happiness, which is really the quest he's on the whole film, the protagonist has to do what Tyler told him he'd have to do: hit rock bottom, self-destruction. He shoots himself in the head. He survives and the buildings are destroyed. So are we to take from this that Tyler was right all along? I don't think so. I think, again, like with all good villains, that the Tyler personality got some of it right. People can't just be blind followers and let someone else tell them who to be, but I don't think the protagonist shoots himself because he's trying to destroy himself. I think he's trying to destroy Tyler. In a sense, yes, he had to hit rock bottom. It's only when we've lost everything that we're free to do anything, Tyler says earlier in the movie. The protagonist finds it within himself to make the difficult choice, partly because Tyler helps him get there, but also because Tyler is the most psychotic part of his mind and he has to stop him. Tyler's philosophy is inherently a hypocritical one. He wants to free people by recruiting them into an army, trading one form of bondage for another. The very first thing he does with his new club is force rules on them. He doesn't explain why the rules are there or what they're for. It doesn't matter if some of them make sense. He spouts platitudes that sound enlightened, and so people go for it. A good man, Bob, winds up dead because of him. There's some truth to what Tyler says, but his is not the answer. So assuming Edward Norton's character survives his headshot, and assuming he doesn't get arrested as soon as he leaves that building, I think he finds a middle road. He starts to have a real adult relationship with Marla. He finds substance in his life. He looks for a job that he enjoys, and he doesn't let whatever career he takes completely define him as a person. Maybe he finds comfort in a hobby. He realizes he lives in an imperfect world, and he finds solace in understanding that. Real enlightenment is knowing when society throws ridiculous BS at you and ignoring it. Early on in the movie, he calls himself a 30-year-old boy. I think if he survives all of this, he grows up. He becomes a man. He finds his missing masculinity in living and taking charge of his life, not in fighting. Now that's how I take the ending. I think there are definitely other ways to look at it, and I'm glad that it doesn't go any further than it does, because otherwise you wouldn't be able to look at it in your own way. But to me, it goes along like the most cynical movie I've ever seen, and the ending is a strangely happy one. I am Captain Logan's droning ramblings. Another idea I really like is that identity comes with difficult, self-sacrificial choice. We don't get Bob's full name, Robert Paulson, until the members of Project Mayhem start chanting it after he's killed on a mission of vandalism. They tell the protagonist that there are no names, and he doesn't know what they're talking about. He still doesn't know who Tyler really is at this point. And he says his name was Robert Paulson. Because they hang on to his every word, the members interpret this as his earning his identity by sacrificing himself. Tyler is given a name, but the protagonist never is. Tyler is self-assured and knows just who he is and what he wants. Edward Norton's character, until the end, is a man without purpose who's obsessed with things. We get the perfect symbol of this when we see his refrigerator after Tyler blows up his apartment. He has only condiments and no food. All the trappings, but none of the substance. And he just follows Tyler's lead the whole movie until he makes a definitive, personal choice to shoot himself in the head. He doesn't have an identity and perhaps doesn't even think he deserves one until he does something so risky and for himself. He's still never given a name, but he clearly has achieved happiness by the end. We know he at least believes he's on the right track now when he tells Marla, "You met me at a very strange time in my life." His problem is that he's two extreme archetypes, and at that moment, he transforms into a real three-dimensional person. And to me, that makes him real from the beginning. His problem is that he's not allowing himself to really live his life. He has a clear opportunity for change, and he takes it. I'll briefly comment on the black humor, some of which I thought was genuinely funny, and some of which I wasn't sure if I was supposed to be laughing at or not. Some people find things like Meatloaf's character Bob having man boobs just inherently amusing. I thought the character was sad and strangely compelling, losing his literal manhood to testicular cancer and then joining the Fight Club. He had the best reason of them all, I thought, but I couldn't really laugh at him because his situation was very serious and dark. It's a credit to the film that I liked and cared about that character, and I felt that there were portions where I was supposed to be laughing at him, and that was kind of disturbing to me. I am Captain Logan's tendency to overthink everything. On the other hand, the scene where Marla and the protagonist are divvying up days to visit different support groups is very funny, especially when he yells, "I want bowel cancer," and a man sitting in front of them looks up totally perplexed. There are a number of other things I could have talked about. This is a really dense film, but I really wanted to focus on the first-person perspective and how that affected my interpretation of the film because I thought that was the most interesting thing going on here. I'm not sure I enjoyed the film as much as I enjoyed thinking about it, and perhaps that's the highest compliment I can pay it. I'm going to give Fight Club a 3.5 out of 4.